But what it's also done for him is confidence and joy. And so last year we were driving home and he said, "Mum, I can't do many things, but I can ride a horse." What I've learned is that there is passion in people that you least expect it. And their willingness and the time that they take and the commitment that they show is extraordinary. A volunteer was telling me about this little girl who is nonverbal, but she spoke when she was on a horse. And her mum had tears rolling down her face.
In this episode, I sit down with Tanya, President of Riding for the Disabled Association of Victoria, mum, and one of the most quietly passionate people I've ever had the privilege of speaking with. This episode is different. It's not a story about reinvention or ambition. It's about joy, about a little girl who spoke for the first time whilst on horseback, about a woman in her 60s who was told her whole life that she couldn't, but she did. About a teenager who came home from his first competition and said, "Mum, I can't do many things, but I can ride a horse." It's about what happens when we show up for others and what that quietly does to us in return. Whether you know anything about horses or disabilities or volunteering, none of that matters. This episode will fill your heart right up.
You've got people that have been told I can't do something for most of their life. And to be able to give them the opportunity to tell them that they can do something is incredible.
Welcome back to another episode of Midlife Unfiltered, and today I am super excited to be bringing one of my really old friends who I haven't got to see very much over the years, but I certainly consider her someone that I guess I've followed, stalked comes to mind. Today we're talking with Tanya Twaits, and Tanya is the President of the Riding for the Disabled Association of Victoria. It's a volunteer-led organisation that supports people with disabilities through therapeutic horse programs across the state. Her connection to RDAV began as a parent when her family experienced firsthand the confidence, well-being and sense of belonging the program can create for participants. And I'm really excited to talk about that more. What started as supporting her child quickly grew into a deeper involvement as volunteer and advocate, and now she serves as president, helping guide the organisation's future and support its network of centres, horses and volunteers across Victoria. Professionally, Tanya has more than 15 years' experience in senior commercial and go-to-market in a number of different industries. She brings the strategic and commercial perspective to RDAV, helping strengthen the organisations so that more participation and families can benefit from the unique impact of horse, community and inclusive programs. So welcome, Tanya.
Thanks, Margaret. It's a really nice introduction.
Look, I think it's slightly inadequate in many ways because I think there's so much more to you and what you do than we can include in an introduction. And so I'm really excited to talk to you today sort of more about the work that you're doing, because I just know, like, I've worked in the sports industry and that kind of work makes such an impact. So let's just start with, you've got a professional career as well, you've got a family, and yet you're serving as president of a volunteer organisation, which has a lot of volunteers, by the way, like over 1,000 volunteers, and it's supporting hundreds of people with disabilities. So what keeps drawing you back into this work?
It's very easy when you actually go to a centre and see the program in its entirety. For me, it's watching a child who may turn up, who's, quite anxious, is a little bit jittery, gets on that horse and just relaxes. And that smile that comes out and that ability for them you can just see their whole body just go, "Oh, okay, I'm relaxed." And then they make these little tiny milestones that we take for granted. And I'm so incredibly passionate because I see the joy, I see the change in those participants, and they can be from children right through to adults as well. But you play one very small part in bringing joy to their life and see that confidence grow. I mean, I can talk to you 100 different examples of why, but every time I volunteer at a centre each week, but anytime I go to a centre and just watch that program in action and see that interaction between participant, horse, and volunteer, it's just incredibly heartwarming, and I get goosebumps just talking about it. And I could spend hours just watching and just drawing on that strength of those people that really help and support those riders.
Yeah, oh, like I can feel that when you're talking about that. I really can. And I want to talk a little bit more about the centres in a little while, but I was really interested when we spoke that you encountered riding for the disabled when you were quite young over in New Zealand. I'd love you to tell us, like, how did that come into your life?
So I grew up loving horses, completely obsessed with horses. So I was fortunate to get my first horse when I was 10. That was the rules in our house.
Hmm.
And so we joined the local pony club, and we were also fortunate to have our horses adjusted at the pony club grounds. But before I even joined the pony club, they had a relationship with the local Riding for Disabled. And so when I joined the pony club, I had a horse that was, for a beginner, because I was still technically a beginner, and it was really well suited to help those people or those participants in that particular program. So my parents kindly lent my horse to that program. So once a week, they would get her out of the paddock and saddle her up, and then, a participant would ride. I wasn't involved then, I just lent my horse. But then at the local fair, we would used to sell raffle tickets for them or man the stand, so to speak, and just be one of those, young children running around going, you should support this, because it was all horse related for me anyway.
Yeah.
And so it made sense. So that's how I sort of got involved in the program, somewhat removed from it, but I had 2 or 3 horses that were lent at some point during the 5 or 6 years I was at that particular pony club. So it was a lovely foray into what they did. And now you fast forward, 20, 30 something years. And so when my son, we've got a farm, so we were fortunate to have a pony for him as he was growing up. But as he got older and bigger, it was really hard for me to manage safely getting him on and off a horse. So I then investigated where our local RDA centre was, and that's fortunately for us at Stalesford, and they were lucky to have a place for him at that time, because you've got to remember that horses are matched to a participant. So they've got to look at the type of disability, whether they've got the right controls and different things in place to make that safe for that participant. They've also got to make sure that they've got the right type and size horse also for that participant. So it's also a weight to horse ratio as well. So there's lots of things to consider before someone's accepted into a program, because it's got to be a good experience and a safe experience for everybody. So I was really fortunate that 1, they had a horse, 2, that they had the equipment and support that he needed to be able to ride, and more importantly that we could actually attend on a weekly basis. So that's how I got involved, by taking him to our local RDA centre.
Wow. So, it's really interesting, isn't it, how life sometimes brings us that full circle. So something you were sort of on the side of as a child, but knew about it. Because I think it's really interesting. I'm not sure that many people know about Riding for the Disabled, and yet it's clearly been around for a long time. And it does such important work. And, I was reading a book called Heart of a Horse a couple of months ago, and it's just so interesting when you start reading about horses and the impact that they can have on people. But just how it's just something very special about horses generally.
They're incredible. They have got this innate ability to pick up on things. So we've got horses at home, and they're big horses. And when they're with me, they're quite different than when they're with my son. They're calm. And so when he brushes them, he might brush them in all different ways. And normally they would get a bit angsty about that. For him, they just stand there. they'd sort of nuzzle his neck or his hair or knock off his hat off his head, or they're just these really gentle giants, or they'll stand while he gives them a cuddle, and they're really different. And you can see that when you're at a centre with the participants as well. I was out at Knox yesterday morning, actually, and there was a little boy who's just joined the program for the very first time. So he was holding his toy horse with him as he got introduced to his horse, because it's a bit of an introduction. They don't just jump on. It's come and meet. Jackson was his name. Come and meet Jackson the horse. And so the horse took this is a pony, took one step forward, ears pricked, and his mum just went, wow, like he's this little horse whisperer. This pony was absolutely gravitated towards this little boy and had never met before. It was those sort of moments you go, wow, they just know. They just know to be gentle. So, you know, he's nonverbal, so he has these little cues, but, you know, he was showing his horse to the pony and all of those little lovely things, and that little light touch and that little cuddle around the neck, and just these lovely sort of moments, these sensory moments. It's kind of a really special time.
And it's really interesting to me that I still think we're in this mindset, and it's certainly moving around disabilities, and because a lot of disabilities you don't necessarily see them immediately, or you don't necessarily know them. The RDAV, you know, are there any limitations in the sort of disabilities that they're able to support, or people with disabilities that they're supporting?
There are. You've got to be able to hold yourself on a horse to a point.
Okay.
Safely. So we do have a couple of riders that don't have the core strength to be able to hold themselves on a horse. So they have what we call sidewalkers that lend in to try and support them. Or alternatively, there's one girl at one of the centres who lies on the horse, and so she doesn't have a saddle, but they have what they call like a sheepskin saddle blanket, and so she has two specially trained sidewalkers to support this child as she's sort of lying down on the front of a horse. But I'm going to say over the last 2 years, she's starting to sit up for the first time as well. So those amazing moments. In fact, we do a video dressage competition, and she competed in the fully assisted section of that for the very first time. So, you know, pretty incredible milestones. We've got another little boy that I was working with who had never used the pockets in his sweater or pullover or hoodie, whatever you'd like to call it, and we were doing a game where we were telling him to put, you know, he had to go and collect something off the fence post and put it in his pocket, and we were showing him what to do. And so he did that for the first time, and I looked over to his dad to say, is that okay? You know, we always just double check things are okay. And he just went, he's never done that before. He's never used his pockets before. And that's a small thing. We had another boy who wouldn't put his helmet on, and you have to wear a helmet to be around the horses, let alone to ride a horse. And so over the course of 6 weeks, the volunteers worked with him because of the sensory issues, and worked with him until he could get a hat on. And now that has now opened up a world of bike riding for him, because he could never ride a bike before because he would never put a helmet on. So you have these little stories that then creates bigger things when you go home. So what we take for granted, we just don't appreciate what happens when they go home. So, you know, I have carers and parents say that my child is much more relaxed. This is, for some, it's their only physical therapy that they have during the week. For others who can't ride, to get back to your original question, you can see I go on tangents because I have so many stories to share with you.
I love these stories. My heart just feels so full listening to them. I love it.
So we have what we call a carriage driving program as well. So for those that can't physically get out of a wheelchair, or have the confidence or the desire to ride a horse, because they're sometimes people have degenerative diseases and things, so what they were able to do, they can no longer do. So we have a carriage driving program where we can roll up a wheelchair and fix them in place into the carriage, and they do activities via a wheelchair. or they can sit on the bench, a specially designed carriage and bench where they can sit and do the same sort of activities. So they get different benefits from it, but they get the same interaction as they would as if they were riding. And then at some centres where somebody is that we don't have the right horse for their weight, or for some who won't put a helmet on, for example, or some that get a bit agitated on a horse, we have what we would call an in-hand program, where they may just brush a horse, or they may lead a horse around the arena. I worked with somebody last week who does that. We don't have a horse suitable for her at the moment, so she leads a horse around and does all the different activities. And for the first time last week when I was working with her, we were running and as the horse was trotting next to her for the very first time, and
Wow.
she was weaving in and out of cones, which she's never done before. So, so little things like that. So we do have different ways we can work with people if they can't particularly ride. But we also have special, what we call hoists, where we can safely get somebody out of a wheelchair onto a horse and have the right adaptive equipment to support them while they're on the horse. So we have lots of different equipment, and obviously all our volunteers are specially trained to work with those participants. So we have lots of different ways we can get somebody on a horse and to work with them as well. And then we have lots of different activities to support their goals. And that can be simply from like fine motor skills to obviously developing their core.
Yeah.
I see that with my son. His core has developed. I mean, we work with, he has a trainer outside of riding, but just to see the development in his core so that now he can hold himself up and where he can now actually rise to the trot. Whereas before he would just kind of, bounce around.
Yeah.
And I feel for the horse sometimes, but yeah.
Yeah, I understand. So I'm really interested, because you've talked about your son, and I know he was what's drawn you back into the program. So what was happening at that time? So, how old was he? Where was he at in his own development?
So he was, he joined the program when he was about 11. Actually, we've been doing it, 7 years? And that was, as I said, because he got really tall. And getting safely on and off a horse with just me was quite challenging, and I didn't feel safe doing that.
Right.
Because he needed assistance to get on and he needed assistance to get off. So when you see people, vault their leg over the back of a horse to sit in a saddle, a lot of people can't do that. So you need...
I don't think I could do that. Not vaulting anyway, maybe standing on something, getting over.
Standing on something, but even standing on something and getting your leg over that horse is really challenging for a lot of our riders. So we need somebody obviously to hold the horse. And we have a coach that's always with somebody when they mount. So we need someone holding the horse's head. We need somebody on the other side of the horse, and we need somebody helping them get on and teaching them how to get on safely and properly as well. So for me, even though my horse at the pony was well trained, to hold the horse, to get him safely to push his leg over it, get him to sit up without falling off the other side, was great when he was little, because you can kind of just hold him as he's getting on. But when he got bigger, that became really hard to do. So that's why I had to. He really loved riding, great for his development. Particularly his gross motor and fine motor skills with holding reins, and to learn instructions and focus and take instructions, more importantly. And so
all teenage kids, by the way, taking instructions,
Yeah. But what it has done, and his coach was commenting a couple of weeks ago, said, I haven't seen him focused so much before in the last probably 6 months. So he can really hold that focus for a lot longer than what he could. But what it's also done for him is confidence and joy. And so last year we were driving home and he said, Mum, I can't do many things, but I can ride a horse, and I'm getting better every week. And so when you see that smile and that confidence that produces, you go, that's why we drive that hour every day, to have that experience. And for him, it's that social interaction with the volunteers as well. And so for him, it's that whole community piece and the support. So last year, he wasn't confident enough. He's never been wanting to do competitions. He hasn't been that way inclined. Whereas last year at the Dalesford Agricultural Show, he said, "Mum, I'm ready." And so he went with his dad. Unfortunately, I was traveling for RDA, but he went with his dad and he did what they did, the in-hand program. So he led the horse around and had to follow all the instructions, and came home with ribbons. It's not about the ribbons, but for him it was about the shiny red ribbon. But he, we got him a jacket and we dressed him up and got the right tie to match the bridle on the horse, and he was beaming. I saw the videos, and then he was giving me, step by step relay of the whole morning, and just that confidence. He goes, "Mum, next year I'm going to ride. I'm ready to ride it." So little things like that we take for granted. You've obviously been in the sporting arena a lot, and you're used to competing and you're used to experiencing all of that. He's never done it, and for himself, not as part of school, but to do it for himself and to want to do it, and feel like, as he goes, "Mum, there was lots of little bees and things and flies rolling around in my stomach. I was so nervous." I love how he describes things.
Yeah.
But it was that sort of confidence, and that's what we see throughout the centres, throughout the state. It's those little milestones. It could be simply holding the reins for the very first time. It could be walking unaided for the first time. It could be simply going from A to B, or for some, it's that feeling of movement, because they may not be able to use their legs. So for them to sense that beautiful movement that you get with a horse that they may not be able to experience themselves. It's that joy and interaction with their other riders. It's that relationship that they have with those volunteers. And, I'm a newbie to RDA, can I just say. We've got volunteers that have been 30, 40, 45 years in the program, and they still go every week. And because you can't, once you're in, it's really hard to let go of just that moment of joy and the outcomes that you experience as you work with these participants. And for some, as I said, it's not only the way that they get exercise. For some, it's what actually brings them the most joy and what helps them with their rehabilitation, or their development. And I just don't know of anything that really can combine the beauty of a horse with the outcomes that you get from a program like this. And the horse is obviously really central to that.
Very much so, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just an incredible program.
It absolutely blows my mind because, I don't think, as a parent with, three kids who were growing up very involved in sport, as much as I always encourage the competition, it was never about the competition. But it's something you just kind of assume, right? You just go through it and they're like, "Oh yeah, I'll give that a go." But I know when you've got a child who lives with a disability, that's a really different experience. And those sorts of steps are so much harder in many of the cases. But I know, I look at horses and sometimes I used to be a little bit chicken of them. I'm like, wow, they're so big. And yet I never hear that when I hear stories about riding for the disabled. So there must be something, in the horses that you choose, in the horses that are able to work with these kids. But then you tell me, "Oh, my horses at home are completely different with me to how they are with your son." So how do you choose horses? How do you match them up like that?
So the horses need to never, I should say, a horse is never unflappable. You can't.
Yeah.
What we do is we find that have got a nice temperament, that are quiet on the ground, that they have to be sound, because you've got riders that are somewhat of a dead weight on a horse because of their disability. Right. So they need to be sound. They need to be able to to be trained to get introduced to the different things of equipment. So they need to be able to, for some of those centres that have got a hoist, for example, they need to be easily trained to stand while the hoist is moving, a participant out of a wheelchair across onto their back. So they need to have an even temperament. They need to be somewhat unflappable. You can't, if a child suddenly shrieks out of joy or whatever it might be, or for some, they're non-verbal, but they may make lots of different noises and really excited noises sometimes. They need to be able to handle those unexpected noises.
Yeah.
And to be able to safely have two people either side and someone leading. So, we've tried some horses where they don't like somebody on their right side, for an example. So they need to be comfortable to have, two people walking each side of a horse as well as leading. Or in some cases where riders don't need that, it's not so much of a problem. So they need to be able to be managing that sort of thing. So we don't tend to accept young horses because they need to be out and about experiencing the world, so to speak. And that can be on a farm or different, but just it's exposed to different things, I guess. And then it might take 6 months for a horse to be introduced to a particular rider. So there is quite a time or quite a process as they get introduced to a centre. So obviously it's a lot of word of mouth of, I've got this beautiful horse, I think it might be suitable. A lot of time it's going out and vetting and reviewing and, selecting horses that way. So it's never easy to find, the perfect horse. But we have lots of people on the ground helping us do that, and people contact us directly. Often, retired show horses and that sort of thing often make really good RDA horses. But we also need a large number of sizes. So everything for what you would, those little tiny ponies, which are often like little Shetlands, the 10 hand, all the way through like a 16-hand horse, which is, a larger horse.
Whoa. It's a huge horse to me. I'm like, whoa, hang on.
Yeah, but they're generally ponies because you need to be able to hold somebody, if you need to hold somebody either side, so a volunteer is not stretching out, they need to be able to hold and get a participant off safely. The larger horses tend to be for adults, and some of those can be somewhat independent. They only might just need a lead person as opposed to sidewalkers. So that's why we need a cross-section of breeds and sizes. So it's challenging to get the number of horses in the program at one time. And then if you've got a horse that has, is lame, or, horses have accidents, and they're out, then you don't necessarily have that backup either. So sometimes you need to have at least a couple in reserve. You also need to move them around a bit because, like anything, if you do the same thing over and over and over again, you can get stale. So we do have a couple of volunteers at each centre that will do different things with the horses as well to just make it interesting for them, so they're not just doing the same thing around an arena. We also get them over the summer when we're not running. They tend to get taken somewhere else so that they can have a change of scenery, spend some time in a paddock before they're brought in. So we're really mindful. Horse welfare is top of mind for us in the organisation. We do have a horse welfare subcommittee. At each centre they have a horse welfare representative. So horse welfare is front and centre because obviously they are our lifeblood. Without them, our program simply doesn't exist. So it's really important that we manage our horses in a really beautiful but also safe way for both, them and the participants and the volunteers that they work with as well.
So you were saying when you were growing up, you used to lend your horse to the RDA over in New Zealand. Is that what still happens? Is that how you get your horses? Are they lent? Do you own any horses as well, or like how does I'm just like I'm quite mind blown just thinking about the scale of this, the number of volunteers, the number of horses, all the different things that you've got to think about. So, and I want to get to the volunteers, but right now I'm just a bit like, where do all these horses come from?
Yeah, it's a good question. So at the moment we've got 225 horses in the program. So some are owned by RDA, some are leased by RDA as well, and then we've got some that are loaned or brought into the program. So in regional areas in particular, A good example is Woolamai. One of the volunteers brings his 2 horses into the program. The same thing in Bendigo, there's some in Ballarat. So there's lots of different places that actually bring the horses in for that weekly session. The metro centres, which run anywhere between 3 days and 6 days a week, their horses are on site, and they're either owned or leased by RDA for those particular programs. But in the regional areas, we have a number of volunteers that bring their horses in. I've got to say that those horses have been reviewed, trained, and managed to be in that program. It's not just, hey, I've got a horse in the backyard and I ride it and I'm going to bring it in. It's not quite as simple as that. They are trained and managed accordingly. And that volunteer might often say that the horse is not right to come today, so that horse doesn't come. So there are guide rails around all of that.
Yeah.
But that's how we do it. So yes, it's a lot. It's a lot to manage. We obviously have to get grants to pay for horses because we are competing in that private sector. Because everybody wants that bomb-proof, beautiful pony that can do everything. So those prices for those horses are getting increasingly more expensive. So we do have to raise funds repeatedly to be able to purchase those horses. But then once they're in the program for a long period of time. And then we do obviously have a program that once they retire, we have a plan for what those horses do post that. But before that, we need to get them, obviously. So that's how we do it.
Yeah, so I imagine, I'm thinking there's 225 horses, it's like over 1,200 volunteers, then you've got to do fundraising. It's not a small job being president of an association like this.
No, but as I said, we're surrounded by incredible people. So each centre is run independently somewhat. Obviously, there's risk management, there's governance, there's coaching, there's training, there's all those things in place from a national to a state office. But on the ground at the centre, those centres are run by these incredible volunteers. So they are essentially running their own little mini operation. So they also do their own fundraising as well as we do it at the state level also. Because we've obviously got to feed horses, we've got to manage all of that, and we don't get any government funding. So we rely on donations and bequests and things like that, and obviously applying for grants like everybody has to as well. So it's a really competitive environment in the charity space at the moment in this
it's huge
climate. Yeah, and so
charity and sports space, it's like really, it's tough getting grants. Absolutely,
it really is. So which is why we rely heavily on volunteers. And as I've said, we've got these incredible people that have been, in some cases have set up the centre and still in the centre, or they've been running the centre, and they coach in the centre. So they not only might be president, or each centre has a committee, they might only be president of their centre, but they're also coaching, or they're also the welfare person, or and they're always,
the multiple roles of volunteers.
Multiple roles. Yeah, we all know it well, right? Yeah, we do it that way. But for them, so I'm surrounded by these incredible people, women and men, and they give so much. But it's a lot have never been exposed to horses either, and that's the beauty of volunteering at RDA, is that you don't have to be a horse person. And so you can learn to be and get trained to be around horses, but you don't have to work that way. As I said, I was at RDA Knox yesterday morning, and one of the lovely volunteers does the gardens for them. She said, I don't want to be around horses, but I'm retired. I just want to give back to my community, and I love being in the garden. And this is a relatively new centre that was started from scratch. And so she said, and they've got a sensory garden. And so she said, I love being in the garden, and they're growing vegetables and things for the community. And, and that's what people do. Or we've got a lovely gentleman, I think he's 15 years at RDA. He's a retired accountant, and he's the treasurer of one of our local centres. And he's actually on our risk and governance subcommittee as well. He's a forensic accountant by his profession, but since retired. Or We've got another one down at Pakenham, who's another gentleman who was a senior executive just insurance. So he's their property manager. So we have these amazing people that have got spare time and they want to give back. And so there's lots of different activities, roles that is not just horses. But then you've obviously got we've got a lovely youth program that obviously want to get their horse fix. So horses are everything for them. And so it's lovely for them to have that balance between horse and help. But yeah, so it's such it's the beautiful thing about this organisation. There's so much variety in it that you can add value at lots and lots and lots of different ways.
It's really interesting because I still deal with a lot of sporting organisations sort of at that state level, and I'm listening to you talking and you clearly have a connection. Like you know your centres, you obviously know them just the way that you're talking about it. You know the people that are there who are volunteering, and you might not know all 1,200, but you're certainly. You can, like, I can hear the level of involvement that you have in there. So I guess what have you learned about people as you lead this organisation of 1,200 volunteers or so?
What I've learned is that there is passion in people that you least expect it. And their willingness and the time that they take and the commitment that they show is extraordinary. As I said, I'm a newbie to it. I've been 7 years volunteering, and I'm talking to people that have been there 35, 40, 45 years and are still going. They may have stepped down from some of the responsibilities, but they're still there. So obviously there's succession planning, but they are still there. And in some cases, it's really hard for them to let go. Because they've got that passion and they do it every week. I was at Colac not so long ago, and this amazing lady who's been in the carriage driving world for a long, long time designed a carriage specifically for RDA. So it's a 4-wheel carriage. It's almost, and she's designed it and worked with a local organisation, I think it was in Hamilton, to design this carriage, which we launched in Colac, before Christmas. So you've got these incredible people doing incredible things. And so what I've learned is that you can add value. You can find a passion in your life, and it could be the smallest thing, but it adds so much value to the people and the outcomes that our wonderful participants experience. And as I said, there's just such a cross-section of volunteers. And, you've got the lovely young people coming in because, it might be a horse fix or it might be that they just want to reach out and help. I spoke to a veterinary student 3 weeks ago. We had a marquee at a local event, and she's a veterinary student, and she said, "How do I get involved?" And I said, "Step into my office and let me tell you about it." Mum was going, "Hey, that might be something I could get involved in with you." And I went, "What a beautiful thing. Yeah, you absolutely can do it together." We've also got volunteers that are participants as well. So at our local centre, we've got a beautiful gentleman who is a participant, but he also volunteers. So he's there, at 7 o'clock in the morning meeting the farrier or working with the dentist. So he rides, but he also does those other things. We've had others that are on committees, that are participants that are also on committees, because they're the voice of a participant that you need for some that don't have a voice.
Absolutely.
In particular. So it's really important. So, but it's also another way for them to develop themselves so that they can feel like they're part of a community, that they're not just on the outer. It's that really inclusiveness that the community can bring. But we've also got, parents that have supported. But we also just have people that saw an advertisement in the paper or on the local notice board and just wanted to reach out. And for some, I went to Swan Hill last year, And I was asking, it was their induction day, so I wanted to find out why people are volunteering. And one lady said, I'm now working part-time, so I've now got time and I'm going to dedicate half of my day to being at Swan Hill.
Wow.
Yeah, and I've always wanted to do it, and now I've got the opportunity to. I met this lovely lady who was in Hong Kong and Singapore. She was volunteering at the Singapore IDA, and she was thrilled when there was some at a local centre to her. So she's now volunteering at her local centre. So you just have these beautiful stories as to why somebody wants to volunteer. And as I've said, and as I've always said, you don't need to have any horse experience. We can teach you that. But if you want to help in other ways, then there is lots of things that you can do. Man that sausage sizzle at Bunnings.
Yeah.
Or we have people that greet participants every session. So, for them to go and get their helmet, or if they don't have the right boots, to get their boots, or, there's lots of beautiful roles in that interaction you have with participants, whether it's a child or an adult. It's really special anyway. And because you're part of their journey and you can see that development. I was talking to a couple of volunteers last week. And I volunteer at Dalesford where my son is, and we've just had a new participant start, and he's a real character. And he's got so much energy, and he's non-verbal, but he has hand signals, and lots of it's this, faster. But we were talking as you always do a debrief after a session. They were like, we can't wait to see how he evolves and develops, because we've seen that with the other riders that we have. And so you're already having those conversations 2 weeks in with a new rider about, isn't this exciting? We can see, how this is going to evolve, and to, what he will.
And that's something that's real. I think that's a really different experience from when we volunteer in other organisations. Sometimes it can feel like, oh yeah, we're just raising more money, or we're trying to improve a clubhouse, or we're doing this. But it really sounds like your volunteers get invested in the journey of the participants in the program. Like, there's just such a heartfelt connection there. It's not just, I'm just doing this, as a volunteer. I'm making a difference perhaps in a different way to other volunteering roles.
Very much so. A volunteer was telling me about this little girl who is non-verbal, but she spoke when she was on a horse. And her mum had tears rolling down her face, and I can't remember what the word was.
Yeah.
But she spoke. And so you have those incredible moments where I still got goosebumps after hearing that story. That there's things like that, and that's why volunteers keep coming back, because it's one thing to volunteer, but it's another to actually see the progression of somebody on a horse. And it's the horse that does it. It's that beautiful innate ability for a horse to connect, and it's that bond that they form, which is why it's important to match the right rider with the right horse. So my son hasn't always had the right connection with the horse, and so he hasn't wanted to ride that particular horse, because as he's grown, he's had to, get a slightly bigger horse. And we haven't had that connection. So it's not always sunshine and unicorns. We've had that moment of, I don't want to ride, I don't want to go, don't make me, and I'm obviously never going to make him. But once he gets that bond back with the right horse, you can see how relaxed and comfortable and his willingness to try different things becomes. So when you see that connection that a participant has with the horse, it's an incredible, incredible experience. Particularly for our wheelchair participants, when the horse is brought over to meet them for the first time, and the horse just drops its head into their lap. Some can't touch the horse because of their disability, and others can. But the horse is gently blowing out of its nose as it's sniffing this particular rider or participant, and you just go, oh my God, there's loads of moments. It's just incredible. Or we have one lady, unfortunately, some weeks she can ride, sometimes she doesn't. She's in a lot of pain obviously she's deteriorating, but so she still comes because it's that bond that she has. It's her happy place, and her mum has actually said that if it wasn't for the horses, she wouldn't be here today, because it's been incredibly powerful for her mental health. And her mum has actually said that on camera. So I'm not saying that out of school, but she said that's for a lot. It's been that mental health. It's that given her a purpose. It's got me up. It's got me doing something. I've spoken to a couple of riders who've recovering from a stroke because they've lost movement down their right side. For them, it's that giving me something to do. I've never done something like this before. We've got a lovely lady who's I think she's 66 in Peninsula. It's the same thing. I've always been told my whole life that I can't do something. Now I can. It's those amazing stories which is why you get up in the morning. It's why that you do what you do, you make it work, and you support an organisation that has that powerful connection, which you just don't get in a lot of different organisations.
No, I think that's really true. And particularly, because you're on that sporting side of things, but you're also a charity, and, you're obviously inclusive space. And I think when we look at other sporting organisations, there's a real competition aspect to it, and we're moving more towards sort of social and inclusive sport, but it's like you guys are already there. It's all about inclusion and offering opportunities to people to experience something that if you didn't exist, they probably would not be able to at all. As you said, when you were talking about your son, and he kind of got to this point where it was too hard for you it wasn't safe for you to be able to manage him. But this gives a way that you can continue on his horse riding, which is amazing. So tell me, is it 35 centres you've got around Victoria now?
We've got 33 centres.
33. Okay, so there's 33 centres around Victoria, but I know, we've got a centre just down the road from where I live. I know they're all over Australia, and then I'm hearing you talk about Singapore. This is not a small organisation, and it's certainly not going anywhere. It's here to stay. So I'm curious, in each of those centres, understand they're run by like independent committees and volunteers. How do the local communities and businesses sort of contribute in that more local, or how can they contribute in that more local sort of sense?
So they do it in a number of different ways. So some provide what we'd call, corporate volunteering days. They'll go out and paint the arena fence, or they'll do the gardening, or they'll assemble things, or whatever it is. So some do that corporate. Others have connections with local businesses. The Bendigo and Adelaide Community Bank Network is a great supporter of RDA, and most centres have a local Bendigo and Adelaide bank in their township. The local Rotary is also a big supporter as well. And then you'll have independent organisations that might provide a discount to feed, as an example, or will happily deliver, or with sand or dirt or gravel, or you have those sort of businesses too that donate product. And then they often do their own local fundraising too. So it might be a raffle at the local community pub, or there's lots of different ways that they get local support. Obviously, sometimes it's a challenge for them to do that, and they have to approach us as a state office. So particularly when a horse has a large veterinary bill. So we support where we can. So those unexpected expenses. So we have, as an example, the state office has a horse welfare fund that we have it sponsored. And so we're able to provide funding for those unexpected, $2,000 bills, as an example, where, because it's horses, right? Things happen.
Yep, it is.
Yeah. They're not immune to it.
No, no,
And so,
it's not
just the
like
way
putting
it
a
is.
new chain on a bike, right? It's like, no,
Yeah,
it's a lot more complex.
that's right. I mean, obviously the everyday, the dentistry, the farrier,
Yeah.
and the vet checks, they're all, every day, and that's budgeted for. It's those unexpected things. So, yeah,
Yeah.
so we have a horse welfare fund that we have a sponsor, which is amazing. And so they can, obviously put in an application and we can fund those over and above things. So that's great. But they still have to develop those relationships locally to get that support. So it's not an easy thing, but fortunately for most of our centres, they're well established in that local community anyway. So, and because of the volunteers might have their own contacts and networks, they sort of tap into those as well to develop that. It's certainly what we've done at Dalesford, and obviously I help that in other different centres. There's also local grants, so you might there's a lot of local grants that, whether it's a real estate agency or that's one that comes to mind, or there's a couple of others that will also do grants.
Local councils, local
And
councils
local
often have,
councils, exactly
definitely.
right. Yeah, so there's those. So there's also, on that committee for that centre, there is those that will write grants, or as a state body, if we're all doing a grant, for a similar thing, we'll obviously share those as well. So you're not having to, reinvent everything every time.
Yeah.
And then there's a couple of centres that obviously get grant writers on a pro bono basis to help them as well. So there's lots of different ways, but it's ongoing, it's constant. So, you've got a centre that is essentially running an independent operation, overseen by the state office, which we're overseen by the national office. So there's a couple of layers. And obviously as a state office, we try and support as much as we possibly can, but often they know what works best for their local community as well. So we're somewhat guided by them as to how they want to run and how they want to manage it also. So we've got to be mindful of that because it is part of a local community in a lot of instances.
Yeah. So I can hear there's lots of opportunities for people to get involved. If someone did want to get involved, as a volunteer or even as a participant or parent of a participant, how do they go about doing that?
So we've got on our website, there's lots of different avenues. So if you wanted to, and I'd highly recommend anyone to volunteer. And as I said, you can do as much or as little as you want. But it's just, and if you're working, I work full time and I do this outside of work. I'm lucky I've got an amazing boss. If I need to drop and go to a centre, then I can, and obviously I make up the time. But and I wouldn't have it any other way. But you can contribute in lots of different ways, as we've talked about in the last hour.
Yeah.
So on the website, there's a section all about volunteering. And it gives you a bit of an indication of the different things that you can possibly contribute towards. If you want to be a participant, it's also on the website, and there is a click through. You'll send an inquiry form, and then you can go that way. On the website has also got all the centres, so it lists all the different centres and where they are and the days in which they operate, because they all operate on different days as well. So if you want to become a participant, you can contact that centre directly and put in an inquiry. And to say, we do have a wait list. I will make that known. And we're about to launch a new fundraising campaign to help reduce that wait list. It's called Waiting to Belonging. And as we've said, I've just been around as new riders have joined the program because there's a space and they've been able to join for the first time, and just to see that reaction has been, pretty incredible, and talk to the mum. But some have been on the waiting list for a couple of years, and that might be for some reasons, like we don't have the right horse, or the centre is full. We don't have because every program has to have a coach, and it can't run without a coach, a specially trained coach. So in some instances, we haven't had enough coaches. So in the last 12 months, we've been training up a number of coaches to increase the amount of sessions that centre can run. So that's going to continually build over the next 12 months. But obviously we need funding to support all of those things, to be
so
able
if
to
you're
reduce
listening
that
and you have
bracelet.
if you're listening and you have spare funds,
Yeah, it'd be great. Come and talk to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so everything is on the website, essentially. How you can
Okay.
donate, how you can support. We do have a business supporter prospectus as well, so you become a business supporter. You can sponsor, but if you just want to volunteer, we would love to talk to you because we always need volunteers.
All right. Well, I'll make sure those links are in the show notes. So, and I know it seems really obvious after talking with you here, but if someone was to ask you in one sentence why writing for the disabled matters, what would you say?
In one sentence? Yeah.
Or maybe a couple.
Maybe a couple. Why it matters, you've got people that have been told I can't do something for most of their life. And to be able to give them the opportunity to tell them that they can do something is incredible. That we can provide joy, engagement, inclusiveness, confidence, strength, and I can go on with lots of different adjectives. But to forget all of that in one program is really incredibly special and powerful. Yeah. And that's through the ability and that connection with a horse. And you don't even have to be riding the horse. You can just be working with the horse and you have that connection, which then results in all of those incredible benefits.
And what has riding for the disabled taught you about human potential?
That everyone can add value. And it doesn't have to be large. It can be a small contribution. But everyone has something that they can offer. And even though you might not think you do, and I don't have any experience, I've just been a mum, or I've done this my whole life, or I've done that, you can actually add value in the smallest of ways. And you just need to have somebody to say, yes, you can.
Amazing, Tanya. It's like seriously just, I feel like I could just listen to your stories and the work that you do. I can feel how like just the heart side of it is. So, you know, I am targeting, generally speaking, women in midlife sort of with this podcast, although what I'm finding is it's definitely not limited to that at all. And I always, at the end of each interview, I always just ask just a few little questions. So I'd like to just run them by you now. And I think certainly this first question, I think we all know the answer to that already. And that's, what brings you most alive right now?
Watching participants riding horses.
Yeah.
Well, not even riding. I was at the carriage driving in Mornington recently, and just watching the smile on the face and the fun and the engagement. And so it's just, as I said, I was out at another centre yesterday. I'm out every week, and just watching that joy and that connection and, you know, touching that horse. And, you know, this little boy yesterday morning, as I was helping as a sidewalker yesterday morning, and he was grabbing my ponytail, holding my ponytail as if I was the horse as he was riding. And we had to keep going, you can't do that, you need to put your hand forward. But, you know, when we stopped, it was that lovely sensory moment of connection. He's nonverbal, so just connection. And it was just, that's why. Yeah. It's those things. That's why.
Yeah. And you know what? They're irreplaceable, those moments. They really are.
Yeah.
Okay. What would your bravest self say to you about this chapter of your life now?
I'm glad you did it. I'm glad you took the opportunity to do it. I had never been on a board before, and so I had never had that sort of experience, or that that confidence, I guess, in feeling that I could do it. And when somebody approached me to be on the board because of my marketing background, I went, yeah, absolutely, I can do that. I've been doing marketing my whole career. I went, yeah, that's easy, I can do that.
Yeah.
I'd love to do it. I can see the benefit. I've got this way, we can do the storytelling. That's great. But then when I was on the board and I felt like we could do more, and I felt like there is so much more we should be doing. And then when I put up my hand to say, oh, I want to be president, that was a huge step for anybody. It's a huge step for me without having that background. I've done a governance course, the not-for-profit governance course. Unfortunately, I was sponsored, so I was able to do that. And so that gave me the ability to go, yep, I can do it. But you know what? I'm glad I just went, yes, you should. And yes, you can. And not many people feel like they've got the confidence to do that. I mean, obviously, I've got an incredibly supportive family who backed me to do it and said, yeah, of course you can do that. Sure, yeah, give it a go. Just try it. See what happens. And then, 5 years later, I'm still doing the same role. And I'm so glad that I took that moment to go, yeah, let's do this. Because I can see the opportunity in this organisation. And so let's do this.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, it's amazing. And it, we're hearing I think we've got a glimpse of the scope of it, in this past hour, but it is an enormous role. And, thank you for taking it on, because it's such an important role in our community. So if you could gift every midlife woman one reminder, what would it be?
You've got so much to give. Just find it within yourself. Everyone's got a value. And as I said, it can be the smallest thing. It could be simply, flipping hamburgers and sausages at Bunnings. Or you might have had a career in something and, jump on a committee and add value to that centre or that organisation. Everyone has got the ability to give something. And you should never say, I could never do that, because you absolutely can do it. And you can start small and get the confidence and go forward. But just start. Take that first step and say, yep, I can do this. I've got something to add.
I love that. Oh, Tanya, seriously an incredible hour, and I can't thank you enough for coming on here and sharing just such a heartfelt perspective and those stories. Just I am going to be ruminating and thinking about this for a very long time. So thank you for being on Midlife Unfiltered.
No, thank you, Margaret. I don't see myself as that. I just see what I've done, and I could, everyone could do more. I could still do more. I'm still learning in the role, even after 5 years.
Yep.
And that's the beauty of what life is about. You're always learning. You can always do better. You can always, should I have done this? Should I have done that better? Absolutely, of course. But you can't think that way. You've just got to go on to the next thing. But thank you for the opportunity to talk about it. As you can probably hear, a little bit passionate.
A lot passionate. But that's the beauty of this too. It is, you are passionate about it. It's not just, it's not just a voluntary role. It is a genuine passion for you.
Yes, it is. And so we've got 6 years on the board. I come off the board at the end of this year. But so now I'm already thinking about what I'm going to do, because obviously I'll get more involved in my local centre, but it's how else, what else? And how else can I be involved outside the board? Because it doesn't stop for me, and I don't think it'll ever stop for me. So it's, what do we do next? So thank you for the opportunity to talk about it. It's been delightful.
Yeah, it really has. Thank you. Thanks for tuning in to Midlife Unfiltered. I hope today sparked something meaningful and reminded you of what's possible in this season of life. If this episode lifted you up, share it with someone who could use the reminder. Subscribing will make sure that you're notified when a new episode is released. And leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify also helps more people discover our little corner of midlife truth-telling. You can always reach out through Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. I love hearing from women who are walking this path with me. Interested in working with me? You'll find everything you need at margaretcruise.com. And remember, midlife isn't an ending. It's your invitation to feel more alive than ever. See you next week. And now the legal stuff. The content in this podcast is provided for general information and inspiration only. It does not constitute medical, legal, or psychological advice, nor is it a substitute for independent professional care. Margaret Cruise is not a registered health professional. You are responsible for your own choices and outcomes and should always seek advice from an appropriately qualified professional.